Today, let's talk about how to read guitar tab or tablature. So, guitar tablature is a system of notation that graphically represents music by showing you the strings and frets that are to be played. Unlike standard musical notation that can be used to play many different instruments, guitar tablature is specifically for the guitar and actually shows you where on the guitar the notes are to be played. It doesn't include all of the detail that musical notation includes, but musical notation also doesn't give you the detail that tablature provides, telling you exactly where to play the notes on the guitar. So 90% of the information that you need to know in regards to tablature really can be provided right here with what we're looking at, and I should say this area right down here. Standard musical notation, as you go up in the ledger lines, it goes up in pitch. So even though this may seem upside down to you, this is going to be the sixth or lowest, the thickest string, and this is going to be the first or the highest or thinnest string. So just think, the reason that we're doing that is because when this is right next to musical notation, as we go up in the ledger lines in standard musical notation, the pitch goes up. Same thing is true for guitar tablature. For folks at first, sometimes they get a little bit confused about this, but it'll just take you a minute or two, and once you understand that this is the way that we've done it for hundreds of years, you'll get used to it and you'll get really good at this. So if these are the strings represented on the guitar, these numbers are the frets, not the fingers, but the actual frets that should be pressed down. When numbers are stacked like this, it represents a chord, as opposed to when notes are linear like this, like a sentence, we're actually playing them one at a time. Like this would be the first note, second note, third note, fourth note, etc. Now we also have other notation. So other than just the notes or the actual frets that are played and the strings, we also have some tablature symbols, as noted right here. A hammer-on is when we pick a note, and then the next note is when we snap our finger onto the string without actually picking it, but yet the note actually sounds. And a pull-off is the opposite. We pick the first note, and the pulled note actually sounds, but it's not picked. And we won't talk about those techniques quite yet, but just understand it'll be denoted typically by an H or a P, as denoted here. So this fifth fret of the low E string is played, and the eighth fret is hammered. If there was a P here, then it would be a pull, like 8 is picked, 8 is pulled off to 5. Now we have some other notation as well. Now hammer-ons and pull-offs can also be denoted by an arc. So if there was an arc going from the 5 to the 8, that would also denote a hammer-on or a pull-off. And of course you can only hammer up to a higher note, and you can only pull off to a lower note. Now when we're talking about some other notation, it can vary from notation to notation. That's something you want to be aware of, and it's something that you want to keep an eye on. Use your logic. In the case of a bend, when we're bending a string, you might see a B, and then it might say full for a whole step, or it might say W for a whole step, or it might say half or 0.5 for a half a step or 1 fret of a bend. You also might see an arrow pointing up, and then it says full or 1, or an arrow pointing up and it's a 0.5. And then you may see it come up and come down again, meaning it's the bend that goes up and a bend that comes down. So again, it varies from tablature to tablature. It's not quite as strict as musical notation. When we slide, we're picking a note and sliding to the next note without actually picking it. So in the case of a 7 to a 5, we'll see a slide going down, meaning this note's picked and this note is played from the slide. We're not actually picking that second note. Again, we're not going to talk about the technique in here. We just want to understand how to read. When we're sliding up, we pick the first note and slide up to the next note without actually picking that next note. Vibrato is represented by a V or some squiggly lines after a particular note. Tapping is similar to a hammer-on, except usually we're going to be using the right hand or the picking hand to do this, and you'll see it as a T. Sometimes it might say like RHT, or right hand tap. This is some old school tablature, if you will. And I included this because some people think that tablature is a crutch, where you should really learn standard musical notation. But in fact, it's just a different way of reading music, and both are very valuable in their own ways. However, most guitar players get really good at reading tablature because it's a very short or very small learning curve, whereas musical notation takes a lot longer to learn, and if you don't practice it, you kind of lose it. Tablature is fairly straightforward, fairly simple, and it provides high detail as to where you should be playing on the guitar, but again, it lacks some of the detail that musical notation has. So, both are useful, and for the purposes of this course, you're going to be using standard musical notation because it's very quick to learn, and it provides that high detail of where on the fretboard to play. If anything in this video doesn't make sense, please watch it again, and by all means read this PDF that I have for you, because it's also going to give you some detail that we did not speak about in the video. But for the most part, this will give you a great overview, a basic overview of tablature. Like anything new, it's going to be a little awkward at first, but in time, as you progress, as you feel better, and as you do it more, you're automatically going to get better at it, just like anything that we do. All right, my friends, let's keep going.